Agentic Quality Podcast, where we talk about what actually works in modern quality engineering, beyond hype and tooling trends. Today, I'm joined by Alekhya Guduri. She's a director of engineering at Indeed, and she has over a decade of experience in quality. And I'm super excited to talk with her today about the test automation quality assessment. Welcome, Alekhya.
Thanks, Tatyana. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me over.
Yeah, can you tell us, before we jump talking about the test automation diagnostic, can you tell us more about your role, what you do, and your journey in quality?
Absolutely. So predominantly my experience has been in quality. Up until recently, I was the director of test engineering at Glassdoor. About 6 months back, I took over program management team as well. So my title has slightly changed. Director of engineering of program as well as quality. But most of my experience does stem from quality and testing and making sure that the teams are ready and have confidence release cycles, essentially.
Amazing. And this is what our topic today is about. We recently created the Test Automation Effectiveness Diagnostic, and it's meant to help the engineering leaders to know where their test automation stands, and does it help them to ship the products, or does it slow them down? So I want to dive deep into this diagnostic. It has 10 questions, and it takes only 5 minutes for people to go through it. And I want to talk through this with you to understand if you've seen the issues that we're bringing up here. So the first area here is called trust and signal quality. So a lot of times companies, when they have test automation, they think that we're already mature because we have test automation and we don't have the manual testing. But are they really mature? This is what this section kind of is about. So what is your experience on when the test automation that companies have can be trusted and it has a strong, confident signal for if we can release or not?
Yeah, I'd like to start here. There seems to be so much that we need to unpack with that question, but I'd like to start here. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that teams and leaders do get wrong is that they equate automation with quality. Don't get me wrong, automation is a key component of quality, but they're just not the same thing. Quality is way beyond automation. It's a strategy that you essentially want to build within your team to be able to assess risk, to be able to gauge customer experience, to be able to give you the signals that you need to be able to, so that you can build the right set of features and the right set of experiences for your end customer. Automation is a capability. It's a very powerful tool. And to be clear, I'm a huge believer of automation and all new technologies. And I want my teams to be able to leverage those latest tools so that we can achieve that scale and feedback. But it is not just about automation when you think about quality. It's a part of it, but it's not the entire thing.
Yeah, I love that you said that automation doesn't equal quality. I love that. But it's important. It's one of the signals that we can use to know if we are ready to release or not, right? Exactly. So have you seen teams where test failures are actually slowing us down all the time rather than helping us? Or have you seen when we encounter the test failure, that it's mostly because it's flaky tests or environment issues or whatnot, so it doesn't give us a strong signal? So can you share some experience there?
Yeah, and I have a name for it as well. I call it the green board fallacy, right? When the dashboard is all green, we just assume that our product is healthy, right? But a green test suite or a green job does not always equate to your product being healthy. And your green signals at the end of the day are only as effective as the test strategy that you have built underneath it. So if your test cases do not reflect the business logic that is required from your product perspective, or if it's not assessing risk in the right way, you're just testing out the wrong things and you're assuming them to be right. And unfortunately, that's the trap that we all fall into. What we look at as a metric is just that greenness of the board. What we don't look at, unfortunately, is the rest of the signals that you need to use in order to develop better test cases, in order to develop better bugs management processes, so on and so forth.
That's right. And we'll get to those metrics later in this assessment. So let's move on to the coverage strategy and defect prevention. So like you said, I think this is what you were hinting at. Sometimes our dashboards are green, but then we find bugs in production, or we have the defects that leak in production, right? And then we know that, hey, our test coverage is not good enough because clearly the defects are leaking. Even maybe for the old features that we're updating, we're getting some defects. So what are some of the metrics that you usually track around this?
Before I answer that question specifically, I want to talk about what we should not be doing. There should not be a single set of templatized metrics that all teams should be using across the board. It should be specific to the product area that you are working on. It should be specific to the risk analysis that you have done as a team. So, for example, if you are running a B2B product and there's only a few set of customers that you're catering to, you want to understand what's important for them. What are the things that they essentially need out of it? Is it performance? Is it reliability? Is it all the above? It could be all the above. Maybe you want to test accessibility and performance and reliability and security. But let's not generalize it. Each and every set of team members have their own set of requirements, and that should be indicated in the rubric that you built out in order to assess how your team is doing. What we should not be solely relying on, which we do in general, is lines of code coverage. Again, an important metric to track, but not in isolation. It should be tracked alongside with other metrics, like the number of defects that are escaping, like the accessibility score that you essentially have, like the security vulnerabilities that your team is generating. So holistically, if you take a look at it and design a rubric for your team, that would work much better rather than you using a template that perhaps you find online or ChatGPT gives you.
I definitely agree with you that the customer delight and customer experience is one of the big pillars of quality. So a lot of times we focus so much on the functional testing or functionality of the product that we forget that at the end of the day, we're serving the customer. And if they're not happy, then we're not going to be in business, right? Exactly. But I wanna talk about the test automation coverage strategy here, right? So what have you seen work? We know about the pyramid, right? So what have you seen work well in your experience?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the same point that we were trying to make, right? Like assessing what are the things that your product essentially cares about, your customers essentially care about. Figuring out those details and working alongside with your stakeholder teams, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's engineering, those are things that will essentially help you build a harness that is not just something that you can create, but you can maintain as well. So the things that I would essentially say, in order for you to get your coverage right, in order for you to understand how to build a more sustainable, maintainable product, you want to understand what abilities that do you currently have? What kind of utilities your team essentially can generate? Is your product more data generation intensive? If so, you want to probably work with your engineers to come up with APIs, test utilities that can generate those, the data points that you essentially need. Is it heavy on security testing? Do you need to come up with a tool, an open source tool integrated with your framework so that you can test those security vulnerabilities? What I have seen work very well is identifying the areas of vulnerability or the areas of impact that you want to provide to your product and carving out that as part of your plan.
I think that's very close to the risk-based approach, right? Mm-hmm. So you identify where the risk for your customers is the biggest, right? And so we have number 4 here, which is a layered coverage, but it's risk-based, which I think is a smart way to go.
Exactly.
Moving on to other metrics that we haven't touched on yet. So what about lead time to change? Is that the metric that we can use to measure our quality initiatives' effectiveness?
It can be. I'm a big proponent of that. I think it's important for us to understand how our overall business is impacted by quality. If you are pulling the right levers and if you have the right level of automation maturity, you should see a downstream impact on all the other metrics, whether it is lead time to change, whether it is failure rate, whether it is defect metrics, everything should be impacted associated with that. You have to keep in context that you cannot be a very mature product-oriented company where you are working on basically a product that will take 6 months and then calculate the lead time to change and make automation responsible for the additional time that you're essentially seeing on those metrics. So you need to evaluate whether that's the reason why I keep saying, don't use the standard template. If your product essentially does not comply with certain metrics, or you think that those are not the right signals for you to provide to your teams, perhaps that might be a evaluation that you want to do with your product managers as well as engineers to be able to come up with the right set of things to look at.
Yeah, and I've been in the companies who say that, hey, we don't need to release more than once a month. Like it's not in our customer needs to do that. Or some products, they just release every 3 months and this is their kind of strategy and they don't really need to release fast. But where I think the lead time to change matters is how ready your code is for production at any point of time. Like if today you want to release to production, are you ready? Or are you always going to need like 2 weeks of time to do your regression and make sure that nothing else is broken? So as long as you're ready at any point of time to release, then your lead time to change is short, basically.
That's a very fair point, but I'll also say this. If your project does require you to take a month to finish, to have all the components in place, you will never have that lead time to change in between the product timeline, unfortunately. So even whatever you have built right now, even if that is particularly ready, that's good. That could be an indicator that you use in order to understand if your rubric is working right. But if your project extends for 6 months and you have that 6 months as lead time for change, then perhaps that's a metric that's of no use at all. It is determined by your project delivery rather than any other engineering factors that is going as part of the process.
Yep. And talking about the next section in this assessment, which is a sustainability and maintenance of your test automation. So a lot of times we have this amazing, test automation, but it's so expensive to maintain. So have you faced issues like that in the past?
Absolutely. It's the peril for any quality engineer to have to be able to weigh the risks of creating tests and also understanding whether they are maintainable or not. The way that we like to combat it within our teams essentially is identifying whether these tests are providing value, if they're providing any signals. If you have a test that is failing consistently for over a week and you haven't had the chance to go and take a look into it, or your team isn't prioritizing the fix for it, then perhaps it's a signal that it's a test written just for the sake of writing tests rather than it providing any sort of value to the team. So
yeah, and talking about the outdated tests, some of them are testing something that is not relevant as well, right? And they might be passing, but they're taking time in the pipeline and they're taking time if something breaks. And what about the infrastructure costs, environments to run all of these tests, all of the extra machines? That's also an extra effort that needs to be evaluated.
Absolutely. I think the core fundamental direction that I feel tests or automation should provide is they should help us make decisions. Whether you should release or not, whether you have introduced a regression, whether there is a risk associated with certain release, or whether there's going to be an impact on customer experience. If your test automation is not able to provide that because of whatever reason it might be, whether it's failing consistently or it's unstable or your environment is unstable or the CI/CD pipelines are not hooked in or there's an infrastructure issue, then you might want to ask the question if this is the right strategy for you to be able to assess that risk. Would it be easier for you to just test it manually or come up with a different approach of testing it, or have unit tests created to be able to test that particular component? If you're not able to make a decision based on the test suite that you have, then perhaps that test suite is no longer providing the value that you believed that it did.
Exactly. And I think that we should always keep that on top of our minds, right? Evaluating our test automation, does it serve us or does it hurt us? I've seen so many teams where there's consistently 10-20% of test cases are failing, and then they either spend time troubleshooting them every release, or they just forget about the failures and say, oh, those are fine, and then they're hiding bugs inside of it. So continuing evaluating your test automation and understanding if it's serving you or not is important, right?
Absolutely. I'd like to add one more point over here, which I feel is extremely important in the day and age that we are in right now. This is the point that you just made, which is, you always have failing tests. How do we make sure that we have low cost of maintenance? I think that's a key part over here. especially as we enter into the age of AI, where you have tools in the market that can create hundreds and hundreds of tests within a single second for you. You can actually give them a particular page and they will generate all these tests for you. Those tests will need to be evaluated by a human person that has context on your product, on the business logic, on your user experiences, in order for them to be able to tailor it in a way that actually provides value. Unfortunately, just relying on those tools and building those test suites do not provide a lot of value, because going back to the same point, the moment something changes, they start failing. And the cost of essentially maintaining them at that point of time is much more than just having them not be in place at all. So it's important for us to understand that test automation is not just about writing scripts, it's about writing the right sort of scripts that provide us the signals to make the right decisions at the right time.
And thank you for bringing this up, because AI is right now changing our industry, and it's enabling us to create so many tests so much faster. And we go from zero automation to full regression testing in under a couple months. So it's amazing what it can do. But you rightly pointed that we do need human in the loop evaluating all of this and understanding, does it provide enough coverage? Does it serve our customer scenarios? And is it serving our business goals? So this is what the last section of this assessment is about. Does your test automation strategy serves your business goals, right? Does it scale with how your business is scaling? So I've seen so many times when the developers keep adding developers on to the developer team, and no, we don't have a budget to add the test automation engineers and so how do we scale? And then the tech debt is getting built on the test automation side, and then we're slowing down, and then we cannot deliver the product as often or as fast as we need to, and then it starts breaking down. So how do you see, should we be asking these questions from our business leaders and thinking about if test automation is serving our business goals, where this conversation should happen usually?
Yes, we should absolutely be asking those questions at every level. I think it's important for us to be as aligned with business strategy as possible in order to be able to provide the solutions that the teams need. It's an unfortunate situation that we are in where our teams are shrinking and our role is evolving. But at the same point of time, it's an opportunity in disguise as well. We do have the ability to redefine what QA engineering essentially can be. We can go from just writing scripts and having an ability to automate things from an end-to-end perspective to truly provide quality intelligence for the products that are being put together right now. And a good example of this is some of the non-deterministic products and features that are being pushed out into the market right now. Unfortunately, they cannot be tested by traditional means anyways. So as a function, we need to evolve as well. But at the same point of time, the core question that you wanted us to answer is should we be having discussions about resourcing? How do we manage risk? How do we communicate that quality does take time, and we need to invest it across the board, not just from a QA perspective, but also from an infra perspective, from a developer perspective. We need to have the right mindset to be able to provide that as a service to our customers. And I believe, yes, that conversation needs to be happen, because quality will be.
And what happens, in the organizations where there's no quality leader? You probably have seen these organizations where there are SDATs or testers reporting into the engineering, right? And there's no engineering quality leader who can stand up and ask these questions. So what is your recommendation to the quality engineers in this situation? How can they initiate these conversations?
I use data points. I would use data points to kind of indicate where our vulnerabilities are, where our pain points are. I think there's a good combination of storytelling and data-driven discussions that we need to have in order to embolden ourselves, in order to be able to ask for the right mechanisms, right tools, right strategies to be able to make a difference. Quality is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the QA engineer's responsibility. As long as the leaders of the organization believe in that, it's essentially just providing them the details on why certain things are necessary, whether it's resources, tooling, whatever essentially it looks like. As long as the companies bought into that philosophy, the discussion becomes easier.
I agree with you 100%. Quality is everyone's responsibility, especially in the age of AI and especially in the age of agile. That's where it started, right? That's the only way we can scale it, is if it's everyone's responsibilities. And coming to the end of this assessment, so these are the results. These are the 4 buckets of the scores. And so the first one is automation is working against you. The second one is functional but creating risk and noise. And then the last 2 is reliable and high impact automation. So what would you recommend to companies and teams who end up in the middle here between, 25 and 35? Like, what should they be doing?
I think it's very important for a company to understand what are the areas that they can actually provide impact on immediately, what are their midterm goals, and what are their long-term goals. So I would advise teams to take a look at the scoring in general and identify areas that they can quickly improve on and see that impact. Maybe they have only 3 areas that they need to improve on. Maybe they have 5 areas. Understanding what your goals essentially look like and benchmarking against them will get you from whether it's the middle tier to the highest tier or to the very bottom of the tier to the highest tier. I wouldn't be bogged down on getting low scores. I feel that this is a good situation for you to be in, to be able to at least assess and identify and measure the quality that you're putting together, the quality harnesses that you're putting together. Identifying where to work upon next is going to be a good next step for you. Is going to be a good way for you to understand how to improve on those areas.
That identifying 2-3 pain points or low score areas, right? And putting this on your roadmap and making that your goal or KPI. So that will give you the roadmap probably for a year, or maybe even 2. So I love that they could go about that this way. And this is the reason why I encourage all of you who's listening to take this assessment and understand where are you falling behind. And maybe you're in the top category, or maybe you have areas to improve. But this ties the test automation to the business goals, which helps you sell the value of it to the business leaders in the organization. And for leaders and practitioners who are listening right now, what can they do? One thing you would advise them to do to improve their automation effectiveness overall?
Identify the strategy that works for you and for your organization. I think that would be my one-liner for anybody who's listening to this podcast. Your strategy will dictate your measuring metrics. Your strategy will dictate your automation scale, and your strategy will essentially dictate your resources as well. So first identify your strategy, then look at tooling, and then look at everything else that is associated with it.
Great advice. And thank you for sharing. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for helping us unpack this test automation effectiveness and what that really means, and sharing your expertise and your experience. So where can people find you if they would like to connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me there. And I will share my LinkedIn details with Tatyana so that it can be part of the post.
And any last words of advice to our listeners and engineering leaders out there?
Thank you for listening to me, and please reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any other feedback or anything else. I would love to connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.